All right. So you remember this sort of file-based database that I created? Um, well, it had a pretty major flaw to start with, and that was like I, I sort of just would randomly write to it and update it, but it wasn't very, if my program lost, you know, power, if the program crashed or something, I could lose a lot of data because I wasn't like necessarily writing to it all the time. And the other thing I ran into was, my server was multi-threaded and multiple people could be, operating on this thing at the same time. And so I couldn't necessarily just be like, oh, I'm going to add a write statement, after any time I modify it. Because something else might be modifying it at the same time. And you know how it goes. Like, this was definitely not a great long-term solution. There were many, many issues around, you know, competing writes and reads. And, it's like, okay, I could set up a mutex and, all this stuff. But I was like, okay, fine. I don't know. We'll like double down on this, but make it better, right? And so I sort of split this one file up into many files in many folders, So like my database was essentially split across all these files and folders. Like, say you had a kid, maybe I would have a folder with their name, as the directory name. I think I had actual IDs, not names, but like essentially could think of like that was, the kids folder. And then inside of that was a file for each record. The key, it was basically like a key value store, like a hierarchical key value store with directories. And then the file name was like the key and the value was the value. And I still read and write it using these Lisp, primitives for reading and writing. Just like I was before, just I did it at a much more granular level, right? And, this did kind of work. It worked much better than the other system. I had a lock on each file and stuff. So like I wasn't overwriting one while I was, operating on it or whatever. But I remember I quickly ran into other issues. So like on this like main page, I had like some report or I forget what, but like I needed to list like a person's name and a bunch of other records associated with them. And I would do that for the whole club. Well, if you had 200 kids in your club, which wasn't that unusual, or at least 200 registered ones, they might not show up every night, but yeah, 200 registered and all these records, just loading this one page, this one request would open thousands of files. And, Linux is great at opening files, but not that great. So it quickly became another bottleneck, right? And it was sad because I was so proud of this really beautiful, simple system I created. But there were also other issues. Like I think at the time, fully understand how like writes and caching and stuff worked in the Linux kernel. And so I could lose data sometimes, or even worse, overwrite data. Honestly, it wasn't a great database. I think in hindsight, I probably could have made it okay, but that's, of course, not the direction I went. All right. So, what direction did I go? Did I go, oh, yeah, this would be perfect for a relational database? Let me get MySQL out, or, be really hip and get Postgres out, No, I didn't do that. I was too cool for school, Oh, all right. So before I'll get into this, and the reason why I'm laughing about being too cool for school is this is probably about the time when I quit school. So I was like halfway through my second semester of my junior year. So I was, nearly 3/4 of the way done or something. and I decided to drop out and just work on this program. I was like, I had all these grand visions for it. And, to be honest, there's a lot more to this story about dropping out and everything that, is more related to mental health. But I'm saving that story for another episode when we talk more about like mental health and programming. So I'm not going to get into that now. Just the situation was I ended up dropping out, and I basically was like working on this full time. I would do 12-hour days, 16-hour days. I was like, I'm going to make this work. And so we can go back to now, when I was too cool for school and too cool for relational databases. But I was also too cool for like anything that existed. And well, part of it was I didn't want to have to rewrite everything. So I was like, okay, how can I take this essentially hierarchical key value store and plug it into a more robust database system? So I found this database system called Tokyo Cabinet, which is essentially just a flat file key value store, very high performance. I don't know. I found it and I was like, oh, I could like make my keys hierarchical and, sort of apply my same data layer onto this system. So I kind of created my own internal, like, I wouldn't call it a translation layer, more like I translated the code. But like before, where I had like a directory and then inside there a bunch of records, I took the directory and I concatenated it to the keys of those files. So you'd have like, user slash and then a user ID slash name, and that would be the key, right? And then the value would be their name, obviously. And it would still be something I could read and write using Lisp, like I had been doing this whole time. And part of that, this brilliant innovation I had, I was like, oh yeah, for any of these like directory levels, I'll create an index key as well. And so using this, I could easily look up, okay, give me a list of all the users. And yeah, so I basically created my own layer on top of the key value store that replicated a lot of stuff that already existed in existing databases. But, that's how life goes, right? You don't always do the best thing. And in hindsight, this is probably not the best idea, but it was fun and I was very proud of it. So I created this system, and one of the major downsides was I discovered that I thought when I was implementing this, the database had its own like locking mechanism to make sure that you weren't like overwriting records. Turns out it didn't, or I didn't know how to use it. I'm pretty sure it just didn't, and I don't know how I got this wrong, but I was like relying on it to lock things and it wasn't. So I like found out I was like overwriting records. It was so bad. Yeah, so it was like, okay, I had to create some sort of, okay, that's what it was. So it did have a locking system, but my server was I basically ran multiple instances of my server on the same machine, one for each core. Chicken Scheme at the time, which was what I was using, was green threaded, so it could only ever use one core at a time. So I just ran one instance for every core so I could scale better because, I don't know, it did matter. Yeah. So anyways, I'll fill in, I guess some other stuff happened in between on the non-technical side. I'll get back to that. But on the technical side, so I built this, and it turned out that the locking and everything was, per instance. So I could have one instance of my web server overwriting what the other one was doing. Like they didn't talk to each other. It wasn't really like a database management system. It was just like one flat file with one in-memory program that did the locking. That's what it was. So I went on a whole journey after that, but we're gonna get back to the other part of the story now. So I worked really hard on this, doing everything. I did it all myself. And so at the same time, I was also teaching myself design. So I've always been big on like user experience and creating good things for the user. But I didn't always know how to do it. Like design and has always been my, like graphic design has always been my weak point. And so I think I got some books and I like studied like, okay, how do I, choose the right fonts and, how do I use different visual cues to communicate information? I learned about like information hierarchy and like I taught myself all this because I wanted to make this thing really good. And like looking back on screenshots of it, oh, it looks hilarious. Like the funny thing is, it doesn't look good at all. At the time, I think it definitely did fit with the styles that were going on then. But right now, looking at it, it's just like, wow, it looks so bad. But I do think I did get like a lot of the fundamentals right. Like it was really easy to find the information. Like I followed the information hierarchy, I guess, correctly, even though it looked kind of cheesy, if we're being completely honest. Like, I like the spacing is all weird. Like I didn't have consistent spacing and paddings, and the font choices I don't think were great. And anyways, I was learning, right? And it was still much better than anything I'd done before. And I did it all myself. I had no budget. I had no money. So yeah, that was the other part of this. I had, I literally had no money. Like I put all my money into college. Like nobody was helping me pay for college. I got some scholarships, but didn't pay for everything. So all the work I did at, $10 an hour programming or $13 an hour painting houses or whatever it was, or I worked in the cafeteria, I put all that money towards just paying for tuition, and I still had to take out loans. And so this is really funny to think about now, I guess. But at the time, my food budget was literally $30 a month. That was what I budgeted. I made a lot of bread and ate a lot of bread. And also I had a lot of friends that made a lot of food, and I would eat their food too. And, worked in the cafeteria sometimes and get a free meal there. I was really working on like nothing. And the truth is I couldn't even afford to pay my rent. So I wasn't paying rent at the time. I really literally had like basically no money. And I was like, all right, I need to launch this in like 2 months so I can start getting money. Yeah, so that was what I was operating under. That's why I was working 12, 16-hour days, because I literally had nothing. I put the little bit that I had went towards, buying a domain, paying like $10 a month for 2 virtual private servers or something on, I don't know, Linode, right? And so, yeah, I was teaching myself how to do it all and doing it all. And so anyways, I found, I had mentioned this forum, and I actually, once I sort of got this thing ready, I built like a marketing site for it, and I built some plans for it based on the number of, kids in the club, and I sort of polished things up, and I just posted on this forum like, hey, I made this, come check it out. And I actually had people sign up, and people were really excited, and they started using it. That part, it just still blows my mind. Not because I don't think it wasn't worth it, but just like to go and do that and make it happen. It wasn't easy, especially on no budget, and just having everything riding on this line. Like I dropped out of college, this was it for me. So, I'm just laughing because in hindsight, I'm like, what was I thinking? I know what I was thinking. Again, for another episode, more to do with mental health type things than, maybe making the best decision. But yeah, that's where we were. I got this, it was working, and I got people to start using it and paying for it.